founder of Leading with Power, Keith Tompkins. Let's hear it.
Thanks, Brent. Jake, Josh, thanks for being here. Thanks for coming, you guys. I couldn't be more excited. I want to put you at ease right away. I'm not here recruiting you to do an Ironman, but just out of curiosity, do we have any Ironmen in the crowd today? Hats off to you. Madison?
Madison and Louisville.
Louisville? Oh, close to home. On your schedule, it said that I'm going to unlock the secret of life, so let's get that out of the way right away. And I'm going to ask your permission for something, and I want to give you a disclaimer. Leading with Power is not a religious organization. We're not affiliated with a religious organization, and if you knew me honestly, truly, I'm the most anti-religious person that you know. And I'll clarify that as we go. But having said that, you can't talk about leadership. You can't talk about a man being all a man can be without dealing with the spiritual element of the mind, body, soul, right? And so the secret to life is when our dreams, hopes, and aspirations align with God's given purpose for our life, and then we live under His favor and by His blessing, that's power. And that's the secret to life. And I stand before you as a blessed man that is living in God's favor. None of what I'm going to share with you today would ever have been remotely possible. It's a favor that I didn't earn, I didn't deserve, but by God's grace, when I was 25 years old, I reached out for as I was driving my life into the ditch. I asked for help, and God showed up, and that's the only reason why I'm here. And I want to ask your permission to allow me to freely talk about that without shutting me down, okay? Keep your mind open, and as we go through this, I think I make a strong case that what I'm sharing with you is about you, and it's not about me. And the way this is going to work is I've got 5 funny stories, and sympathy laughter works fine with me. And then I have 5 transferable principles that I think are applicable in whatever area of life that you find yourself in. So let's start with one of the funny stories. As I was training for this Ironman, at the county fair in Chippewa Falls, I ran into an old classmate. And my old classmate, I don't think he had worked out any time recently. And he asked me, "So what are you up to, Keith?" And you never want to ask an Ironman that because you got to have like 45 minutes to hear all the details about I'm going to swim 2.4 miles and do and so I'm explaining to him the process of the swim and the bike and the run, and my buddy, a little overweight, with a cigarette hanging out of his mouth at the end of my story, goes, I think it would be the swim that would get to me. And I'm thinking, yeah, you might have a little trouble with the bike and run too. But so the first transferable principle I want to share with you is the power of BHGs. And that's not a performance enhancing drug. It's big, hairy goals. All right? And living a scripted and intentional life. I was blessed when I was 25 years old to hear a speaker that talked for an hour. I remembered one thing. He said anybody that's anybody in life was nobody until they had a written plan for their life. So I'm a big proponent of living intentionally, setting goals, writing them down. 2 things will prevent you from doing that. Fear of failure will prevent that, and I want to deal with that today. And if some of you are thinking it's too late, I'm already in this mode, I want to tell you that when I turned 55, I made an oath or a vow or a commitment or an availability. And most of what I'm going to tell you are things that have been accomplished in my life since I was 55, which is now the last 7 years. We started a company that has hundreds of employees, helping hundreds of families deal with the heartache of Alzheimer's and dementia in 4 facilities. We learned an industry on the fly, built a profitable business that's taken care of people. At about the same time, the seeds for Leading with Power were formed. We now meet in 5 cities and are impacting men across the Midwest, and there's hope of growth beyond that. And then as I was approaching my 60th birthday, which was 2 years ago, I realized I needed to change my fitness goals, so I decided to do an Ironman triathlon, even though I hadn't done one for 30 years, and the last one I did was only half this distance. But the power of the big hairy goal, I learned later that it actually changes your body chemistry, it changes your brain chemistry. Your body, your mind, and your soul will do amazing things when you set a big, scary goal. And there's a book I highly recommend called Chase the Lion. If your dreams don't scare you, they're too small. And of course, this goal scared me plenty. But it's amazing to watch what happens when you're willing to kind of stretch yourself. And it doesn't have to be physical, it can be business-wise, relation-wise. So I want to talk a little bit about goals. And goals should be specific, measurable, written, and have dates. This prevents Charlie Brown syndrome. Charlie Brown syndrome is this. A lot of people don't know this about Charlie Brown, but he was an outstanding archer. Really good with the bow. He'd go out in his backyard, he'd shoot an arrow into the fence, go up with a red paint and paint a bullseye around it. Never missed. It's like the blind squirrel that gets an acorn once in a while. Too many men, lots of men, we live our lives that way. Stumbling along without a plan, and when you do that, you pretty much fulfill somebody else's agenda for your life. And so I just highly encourage you to consider this. Also, the next step was to take an honest look in the mirror. This can be devastating, it can be difficult. That's why Leading with Power exists, and you have people in here that you can talk to. And because if you actually stop the self-delusion and deception and take an honest look at where things stand relationally, financially, physically, wherever it is, that can be a difficult thing. And when I did that, when I was 25 years old, it caused me to declare bankruptcy. Well, it wasn't financial bankruptcy because you got to have enough money to protect, and I didn't have 2 nickels. But it was a moral bankruptcy. It was a relational bankruptcy. I was in the process of following my dad's example as an alcoholic and driving my family into the ditch, and everything I value and hold dear now, I was destroying at that time, and I had to come to grips with that. So you got to take an honest assessment of where you're starting from. And then goals should be short-term, mid-range, and long-term. You know, the IRONMAN was easy to plan. It had a date certain, October 9th, 2016. You just back up 9 months, plug in the training program, and there you are. So it was easy to plan. I'm going to ask you to do something today that men don't want to do. And I don't like doing it to you. And it's kind of amazing. You know, death is one of the most prevalent, consistent thing that we observe day in and day out, right? And yet we like to live our lives and forget about it and pretend it's not going to happen to us. But all goal setting that's effective starts with the long-term objective, the end point, and then you backdate. Okay, how do I get there? What do I want my life to look like? But I want to ask you beyond that, what is your view of what happens at death? And a lot of people think that we are human beings that have occasional or temporary spiritual experiences, but I want to share with you what I know to be true. We are made in God's image. We're spiritual beings that are having a temporary human existence. And at the end of life, it is not the end. We are going to live forever. The question is where, how, and with who. And that's why Leading with Power is a Jesus organization, because Jesus was sent to the earth to live a perfect life, to pay the penalty for our sin on the cross, but rose again as the firstborn, assuring that those that have faith in Him will live forever in heaven with Him. And if you get that decision right, it changes all of your goal setting. It changes all of your purpose and direction. It gives you the power to accomplish great things, impossible things. It blows me away that Jesus said, "My followers will do the things they saw me do, and greater things than these they will do." Let's do that. Another thing about goals is tell somebody, don't tell everybody. The reason you don't want to tell everybody is, first of all, not everybody cares. And the reality is, unfortunately, people in life kind of want you to do well, but not too well. And certainly not better than them. So it's important that you tell somebody, but if your whole team is full of cynics and people that want to keep you where you're at, you need a new team. And then burn the ships. For me, burning the ships was the day I sat down and I registered for the sprint distance triathlon in Eau Claire, the Olympic distance at Lake Rebecca, the half distance in doesn't matter, Chisago Lakes, and then the Ironman. And You know, we're generous at Leading with Power, and we like to give stuff away and give you a free meal, but if you knew me, you know that if I spend my money, I'm committed, right? Turns out that day was probably the most important day of this whole process, because now I was committed. But I want to ask you, this is a legend. Cortez landed on the southern shore of Mexico with 11 ships, and his goal was to conquer Mexico. And the first thing he did is he told the sailors to burn the ships. Obviously, not so subtle implication is that success is our only option here. We're not turning back. But I want to ask you, if you were going to burn the ships in your life, what would that look like? What ships need to be burned? And some of the obvious things, if we're into porn addictions, drug abuses and dependencies, flirtation with the office girl, those things have to be burned. I mean, that's just common sense, right? But there's other things that are holding you back too. I met with a gentleman last night that just put in his retirement after 33 years in a profitable industry, but he understands that it's no longer his purpose. And so sometimes the ships you have to burn are good things, not necessarily bad things. So, time for another funny story, right? So I do the sprint distance triathlon, which is a 500-yard swim. Should have been taking me 10 minutes, and I'm totally in a panic. Keep in mind the Ironman is 9 times that long. And I'm dead. I'm in trouble. You know what I learned? Is swimming in a clear watered pool with line on the bottom and a lifeguard on each end and a wall to kick off at every 25 yards is not quite the same as swimming in a lake or a river. And then a few days after that, I was having some problems with my calf, and I had it scanned, and to sum it up quickly is my calf has a condition where it's more than happy to let the blood go down to the feet. It's not that interested in bringing it back up to the heart. Not an advantage. So this is a love story that I'm telling you today, and it's between me and my daughter. And so my daughter is the one that watched her husband doing the Louisville Triathlon a year previous, and she sent me a text, said, "Dad, if this was ever still a goal of yours, I know you could do it." And I'm thinking, you thinking that I could do it is enough for me. Let's not ruin that. So I went to her and I said, and I'm devastated. I'm thinking, I did one event and my dream is over. It's done. I go to my daughter's house, I tell her, she's crying. Her dad's dreams are crushed. There's tears in the house. I was crying too. Tears of joy. I had a doctor's excuse to stop this nonsense before it ever got started. So I'm walking out the door, and she says this, "Well, Dad, I guess the only way you could do it is if you could swim fast enough and bike fast enough that you could walk a marathon." And I thought, you brat. Because that is possible. So the second transferable principle is I want to talk to you about the power of love. There are 3 and only 3 kinds of motivations that motivate us to do anything. There's the fear of loss, the hope of gain, or love. Fear of loss is helpful in some instances. A kid's fear of the hot stove keeps him from burning himself. Our fear of being arrested keeps us out of jail. Our fear of saying the wrong things to our wives perhaps keeps the home civil. But fear-based motivation in and of itself is not powerful. And what are men afraid of? You want to just throw out some answers?
Failure.
Bam! Who said that? Perfect.
Having failed a few times.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. Some other things.
Angry wife.
An angry wife makes a lousy life. Rejection, being found out or exposed, not measuring up. Some have a fear of public speaking.
Fear of not being enough.
Yeah, very good. Fear of death. If you make the wrong decision or have not made a decision about who Jesus is, whether you know it or not, you have a fear of death, and you will have a fear of death your entire life. You might be in denial about it, it might be subconscious, but you rightfully will be afraid of death your whole life, and it'll affect everything you do. And the problem is, it leads to an angst in heart, a discontent. The second one is hope for gain. This is probably where most men spend most of our time. Nothing wrong with wanting to aspire, get ahead, win in business, win in sports, have a great marriage, raise great kids, nothing wrong at all with that. The problem is that if that's it, there's no contentment in that. Contentment is never a part of that. It's always, how much do you need? I need a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more. And greed takes over. So fear of loss, hope of gain, neither one of those bring a contented heart. But the purest, strongest motivation in life is love. Here's the challenge. You can't know love if you don't know God, because God is love. But once you do know love, and you do know God, what it gives is freedom. In my Ironman experience, I had the freedom to fail, because there was nobody that was going to love me less whether I succeeded or failed. Not only did I have the freedom to fail, it gave me the freedom to attempt it. Think about it. I didn't practice to fail, I didn't want to fail, but failure, it's 2.4 mile swim, it's a 112 mile bike, it's a marathon. Failure was a likely option, right? And so failure was a reality, but my worth was not caught up in it. If my worth was caught up in it, I'd have to still be doing it, right? Here's what I think, man. I think God wants you free and dangerous. Free men are dangerous men. And if you are leading people, if you can connect what they love with what you need them to do, whether it's your family or your employees or whatever it is, you don't have to motivate them. You have to stand back, get out of the way, make sure they have all they need, and connect what they love with what you love with what they're doing. And that's the power of purpose as well. Another funny story. So the sprint triathlon that was a certain disaster, I was signed up for the very next weekend. I was supposed to do the Olympic distance. And we were going to get to stay at my son's house. I was going to get to see my 2 grandkids. So I told my wife, I said, you know, I probably can't run on this calf anymore. I can't do the sprint distance or the triathlon, the Olympic distance. But I want to overcome this fear of swimming. This just doesn't sit right with me. I know I can do this. So we stay with my son. We show up at Lake Rebecca. 3 minutes before it starts, I look out at the buoys and I ask this guy next to me, I go, where's the turnaround for the 800-yard swim? And he looks at me and goes, there's no 800-yard swim. Olympic distance is 1,500 yards. Well, I had just panicked at 500 yards. I was literally had my back turned and they're counting down the countdown, 10, 9, 8, and I'm taking steps out of the water, my back's to the water, my wife's waiting on shore. She thinks this whole thing's ridiculous anyway. More than happy to take me home. And I can't tell you what happened. It wasn't courage or gumption in me. Somebody maybe pushed me, and I got turned around, and I started. First 100 yards it's all weeds, it's all muck, it's green, it's horrible. But my daughter had done the triathlon the year before, and she said, Dad, there's handles on every buoy. The buoys are every 100 yards. So I'm thinking, okay, I'm started. I'm going to get to that first buoy. If I need to, I'll go over, grab on, and they don't penalize you. You can kind of keep going. I get to the first buoy, and I look over. There are no handles on the buoys. The buoys are this big around, and they're this high. You're not getting on top of them. You're not getting around them. Now we got an issue. Literally, the next 50 minutes of my life was the most intimate spiritual conversation I've had with God in a long time. Seriously, I know it's funny, but I just kept swimming, and I said, God, you created the fish. You know more about swimming than anybody. If you could teach me, and right now would be really a good time. Every 100 yards, and our conversation kept going. Finally, at one point, I heard God ask me, Keith, why are you so afraid to die? And you know what I realized at that time? I wasn't afraid to die. I was afraid of being embarrassed. I was afraid of being the guy that gets plucked out after 200 yards and everybody goes, what was this guy thinking? And coming back in shame. And for me, my pride was a worse enemy than my fear of death. I don't think that's all that uncommon in men. So I think there's a lesson in that. But the next lesson, the next transferable lesson is, oh, this is the love story. Okay, that's my daughter. I wouldn't be here without her inspiration. She's amazing. Talk to me afterwards about her. Here's the next transferable principle is the power of attitude. The wind does not determine your destination, the set of your sail does. I learned this lesson at the Madison IRONMAN a month before the Louisville IRONMAN. My son-in-law was doing it. I'm at the swim finish. If you ever go to an Ironman, you will be shocked and amazed at the body types, the ages, the styles, the abilities, the disabilities of the people who finish. You can't predict it. It's uncanny. I'm watching the end of the swim, and all of a sudden there's a bunch of scrambling going on, and I'm wondering what's going on, and this guy comes in, and they're bringing him his legs so that he can run up to the bike to do his biking. And you know, my calf was feeling a lot better about that. But I want to ask you, that a room this size, what kind of things have you faced? What kind of obstacles have come into your life? In a room this size, there's divorced men, there's men that are currently in relationship trouble, troubled kids, financial problems, business stuff, real stuff, serious stuff. But I'll tell you, it's probably caused you to get stuck. And one of the things I want to try to help you do is to get unstuck. And let me start with a question. Do you doubt for a second that I could introduce you to a man that has faced the same thing that you're facing, and with the help of God and reaching out to friends has gotten through it, and not only has gotten through it, but is now in position to help other people dealing with those? Do you doubt that I could, if you doubt that I could find that, come up to me afterwards, tell me the issue, and I will connect you to a man that has faced it and overcome it with the help of God. So what I want to do is talk about two attitudes that are essential to get through this. And the first one is, humility is your friend. And I want to give you a humility test. Are you a grateful man, or do you have an attitude of entitlement? And the difference is, an entitled man is never satisfied. There's never enough. You're always mistreated. Life is never fair. But a thankful man is thanking everybody all the time. A grateful heart is a gateway to joy. Joy as a leader is an incredible, valuable character trait. Your family needs to know that it's possible to win with you. Your wife needs to know it's possible to please you. If you have employees, they need to know what a win looks like and that it's possible. Another question I would ask you, are you teachable or are you stubborn? I was broken down in every aspect of this. I should never have completed it. I thought I was a good swimmer. I wasn't. I thought I knew how to bike. I had to relearn that. And I wanted to quit. I quit a lot of times. But God just wouldn't let me quit, but He kept me teachable. And if you're teachable, it's exciting, but you got to admit that you don't know it all. And that was part of my problem. But it opens up a whole new floodgate of life if you take a teachable approach. Learn something new. Or I can guarantee you right now as you sit here, there are some things you believe to be true that are not true. And you might have believed them your whole life. So consider that. And then, are you forgiven? And do you regularly forgive others? Or is bitterness growing in you? First of all, are you humble enough to have asked God's forgiveness? The Bible says all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. All have sinned. We all need a Savior. Have you come to that place where you've asked for forgiveness for that? Are you somebody that regularly forgives somebody else? Or are there people in your life that you refuse to forgive, which is going to create bitterness? My grandkids, German short hair, 3 days ago taught me a lesson I want to share with you about this. we were out for a walk. He got into the woods, got into some bones that were huge. He's just a pup. He's 9 months old. And my 14-year-old granddaughter and I were out there, and he comes over by us, and he's still running around, but he has a huge bone stuck in his throat. And he must have been able to breathe through the nose, through the back of his throat. But we get him to the house. I had my fingers on it. She had his mouth open. I had my fingers. I could not pull that bone out of his throat. We take him back to the house. I go in the door. I say, when Reagan brings the dog in the back door, we've got a problem. And we're all getting after it. And my daughter is on the phone with the vet. My son-in-law's got his mouth open. We're all getting bit and cut. Because here's what happened. He wouldn't let us help him. And the more we tried to help him, the tighter he closed down. And I did this. I prayed to myself quietly. And then I changed my approach. Instead of fighting with him, I started loving on him. I started petting him, calling him by name. I started massaging his jaw. And you know, he started to relax. And by that time, you could see panic in his eyes. But as I was loving on him and petting him, his jaw opened just enough, and we got the bone out. Now there's a lesson in that for us on both sides. What is it you're biting down that God wants to open up in you? You know, I've been driving around in my car the last several days, and every once in a while I'll just go, what is it, God, that you want to remove from me that I keep hanging on to? And I'm telling you, bitterness is not hurting the guy you're bitter against. It's killing you. So please consider that. And please, and those of you who are helping men through that, I think the lesson is clear. Don't fight with them. Love on them. Be patient with them. Keep petting them. You started this, Josh, or TJ. Pet them nicely, but stay with them until they're able to open that jaw and get rid of that, because it's blocking life. The second attitude is to be relentless. There's a rule of success here I want to share with you. Don't die. Even death, though, it can be done well. You can live your life in such a way that you leave a legacy, but if you die, your earthly goals are probably about over. And the second one is, don't quit. I left for you on the table a card. In case you can't see this, please grab a card and take it home with you. But it says, the devil whispers, you can't withstand the storm, and the warrior replies, I am the storm. And I believe leading with power is a gathering storm. I believe we together are a gathering storm. And I want to prove to you that this is not just a macho statement, so I'm going to ask you to grab the bookmark that's on your table with the Leading with Power side out. I'm going to take you through this in 30 seconds. And this will also tell you why I am one of the most anti-religious people you'll ever know. The first illustration there illustrates the problem. We're born into this world on the wrong team. We are separated from God because of our sin. The second one is that all the different things that you and I try to do to make it right. Religion being one of them, morality being another one, good works being another one, that somehow a lot of guys believe if I do 51% good things in my life, 49% bad, I'm good to go. I'm with God forever in heaven. And I want to tell you that it's not true. The Bible says all of your works are like filthy rags before God. It is by grace that you have been saved, a free gift of God that nobody can brag about it. So the bottom line there is the way to turn the power back on in our lives is to put faith in Jesus, who's the only one that can usher us back to the power plant, which is the Lord. On the backside, I'm not going to go through this, but if that's true of you, or you want that to be true of you, then all these things on the backside, take this home with you. These are all true of you. You're accepted, you're secure, and you're significant. If we want to talk more about that later, that would be fine, but now it's time for another funny story. So, any good coach will tell you that if you're going to do a distance event, you never want to eat or drink anything that day that you haven't trained with. Just really good advice. So we're checking into Louisville, and they give you out all this stuff, you know, and the food bars and stuff. And they gave out a thing called Hot Shot, and I don't know why, but I stuck it in the pants pocket of my shorts. The pictures you saw on when I started the run, my wife and my daughter were taking those pictures. It was right at the beginning of the run, and they were all a lie. I was panicked. I had cramped at the 100-mile mark. My left leg was done. I was pedaling with the right. The left leg was riding along. I started the run, and then the right leg seized up. But I'm smiling and waving to him, and then my son-in-law came up a mile into it. He says, "How you doing?" I said, "I'm done." He said, "What do you mean?" I said, "My hamstrings and my quadriceps on both legs are completely seized up." And he said this. He said, "It's okay. You don't need those now." It's like, what? So I'm heading to the sidewalk to try to find somebody with a cell phone to call my wife and tell her it's over. This is where the dream dies. I've wasted 8.5 months of your time. People back home are watching it on the computer. I'm disappointing them. I had a beautiful swim in the Ohio River that was glorious. I got through the bike, and this is where the dream dies, right here. It's over. And then follow the sequence. I cried out to God. I reached in my pocket and I looked at this Hot Shot, and it says, "It alleviates cramps at the nerve level." Okay. I open it up and I swallow this tube, and immediately it was so caustic and burned my throat so badly that I was sure it was liniment, and I was supposed to rub it on my legs. For real. But then I looked at it, and it had nutritional information on it. And I'm thinking, they're not going to put nutritional information on something you don't ingest. And then I thought, well, this was probably like a 6-month supply, 1 drop in your water bottle, and I just drank the whole thing. So anyway, I went over to the side of the fence then, and I just did 2 strides, 1 in each leg. And then I stood up and I go, you know what? I think I can keep going. And that's what happened. So the next transferable principle is the power of team. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far in life, go together. And any accomplishment in life is accomplished with a team, any great accomplishment. And do this. This would be a blessing for you. Start making a list of people who have influenced you that are on your team, whether they know it or not, and then take the time to tell them. This is my list, and I'm not going to, since you don't know any of them, I won't tell you a lot about them, but notice that the second one on there is my wife. I told my wife, I won't do this without your blessing. It took her a while because she thinks that this is kind of stupid and that people that do it are kind of stupid. And so back in March, she finally said, okay, you have my blessing. About 3 days later, she's reminding me how stupid it is, and I said, honey, I think we need to sit down and talk about the definition of a blessing. There are 4 people on that list that are Ironmen. That's just smart. If you have a big, hairy goal, find some people that have accomplished what you want to accomplish. There's one cynic on that, and he was like my head coach. And he's a great guy, but he's one of these Kona qualifying guys. He's a for real Ironman. And I would start telling him some of my swim times, my bike times, some of what's going on. And I could tell, he never said it, but I could tell he didn't think I was going to be able to do it. And, you know, he was smart to think that. He admitted later that he thought this was going to be a disaster. And then I want to talk about one guy on here. His name is Kevin Freeman. Kevin Freeman is a simple man. He's been the janitor at the YMCA where I live for 35 years. When he found out I was going to do an Ironman, from that day he found out, he started, every time I went to the Y, he said, hey, Ironman. He started calling me an Ironman. And how hard is that? You know, and who in your life could you just affirm and believe in that would make all the difference in the world? Now when my wife goes up to the Y now and I'm not around, he'll say to her, where's the Ironman? A key member of my team. All right. Last funny story, so this is your last chance. Some of you that haven't laughed so far. So I got running again, and I do this 7-minute Galway deal where I run for 7 minutes, walk for a minute right from the beginning. It takes humility to do that because you're 8 minutes in and you're walking, and people are running by you going, "Did you not know this was 26 miles? Why are you walking?" You know? But I was able to get back into that rhythm. I got to the 22-mile mark, and I started realizing when I tried to run, those legs were going to go again. But when I walked, it was okay. And so I looked at my watch, and you have to be in a certain amount of hours. Most of them are 17. This one was 16. I realized, 4 miles is still too far to crawl. But it was okay to walk. And I was going to be in about 14 hours if I walked. So it's like, started like a victory lap. It's like, I got this. So in Louisville, the run is downtown. It's 6.5 miles out, back. You get to sniff the finish line, and then they send you back out to do that again. And I go by this bar, and it's Sunday night, and the Packer-Giant game is on in the bar. So I go in the bar to check the score. And the Packers had just scored. It was about halftime. They were ahead, and I come out of the bar. I didn't have any money, or I would have had a beer. So I don't know what that says about me, whether I'm just not a committed enough triathlete or if I'm just a really avid Packer fan. So the last transferable principle I want to share with you is the power of purpose. This is where it all comes together. This is where, first of all, Ephesians 2:10 says that you are God's workmanship. What it really means is masterpiece. The word itself is poema. It's where we get the word poem from. God's very happy with you. He created you. He loves you. He rescued you. He wants to welcome you home if you don't already know him. But you're his masterpiece, and he has a specific plan for your life. And that's where power comes from, is when you can line up your goals, dreams, and aspirations with your God-given and called and gifted purpose. That's where power is. Now, let me say this. Some of you are just battling with something in life right now that you don't even have time to think about setting big, hairy goals. I'm trying to get through today. I'm trying to solve the problem I got coming up tomorrow. I want to tell you something, that no matter whether it's a big, hairy goal or a great adversity, the objective in your life is the same. And that is, God wants to bring us to a place where we are joyfully, desperately dependent on him. And whichever way you come at that from, if you have the freedom right now to be setting big goals, take advantage of it, because you will have this is what I know about all of us. You're either coming out of a storm, you're heading into a storm, or you've been through a storm. And it's recycles. So take advantage of the time. If you have a time now to set big, hairy goals, set them. If you have something you need help with right now, ask for help. Ask for his help, and then ask for the help of the guys in this room. But wait, there's more. Not only do we have an individual purpose, but we have a corporate purpose. This is from Exodus. But I have raised you up for this very purpose, that I might show you my power, and that my name might be proclaimed in all the earth. God has a purpose for us. I believe that Leading with Power is a gathering storm to tell his story, to make him famous in Madison, in Brookfield, in Green Bay, and Wausau, and Middleton, and LaCrosse, and Des Moines. And I just am excited about you guys and your future and your potential and what you have going here. And I want to close my remarks by sharing with you, I told you at the beginning that I stand in the favor of God and I operate in the blessing of God, and that it's nothing about me. And I have a photograph that I want to show you that proves this. I believed failure was entirely likely until my birthday in July, when I did the half Ironman. My wife has taken thousands of pictures with her phone before this and since this. And this has never happened before or since. And we're going to celebrate Christmas pretty soon. Jesus coming as a baby. But he came with a purpose, right? And I started thinking about this. He had a big, hairy goal. He was motivated by love. He had an attitude of humility and relentlessness. He put together a team, and he accomplished his purpose, right? But you remember Holy Week when he was being mocked, and the crown of thorns was put on his head, and he was being tortured and spit on. They put a purple robe on him. You remember they put a purple robe on him, and they mocked him as the King of the Jews? When I saw this picture, it was a visible sign of a spiritual reality for me about God's protection and God's blessing. And I want you to know that same favor, that same blessing is not only available to you, but God wants you to have it. And so this was the picture. If you can't see that very well, I'm behind there changing into my bike jersey, and the sun in one snap of my wife's camera came out purple. The pictures before that didn't, the pictures after that didn't. And to me, it was just a reminder of living under God's favor and God's protection. And when I align my purposes with His, we're an unstoppable force. So thank you for your time and attention. That's all I have to share with you today. I'm excited for you. Next month, do not miss next month. Cody Bobet, bring a seatbelt with you, bring a friend. Cody Bobet is a unique person, a unique personality, and on a unique mission. So don't miss next month. Thank you guys for having me. Good night.